All right, good day. This is Travis Marker, Lisa Wayment, and America Francis. We're with Steward Growth, and we're doing our conflict coaching session today. This is an open class. Everyone's able to participate. You also can join our sessions by way of the virtual recordings later on YouTube at Steward Growth. What is it, Lisa? It's it's on YouTube, but if you type in Steward Growth, you should find it, right?
Yeah, I can give you the actual full name here in 2 seconds.
Yeah, no big deal. But today, so what we do in the conflict coaching is we pick a theme relating to conflict and we work through the theme. And just in brainstorming, we've kind of thought we could play around with defensiveness and graceful surrendering or retreating or being able to just maybe walk away from the conflict without maybe losing yourself in that process.
And I'm really glad because we left that topic before when we were talking about, I had some comment at the end of one of our last ones where I said, keep trying, keep working, whatever. And I was like, I really want to discuss the option of surrendering as another option you can take, because sometimes the right option is not to continue fighting or whatever. Sometimes it's just to accept and surrender. And so I'm really looking forward to this.
Yeah. Well, I think that initially, if we start with just the idea of defensiveness, it's my impression as a mediator, and I know that America's also a mediator, and Lisa has experience with dealing with customers and disputes. Oftentimes, it seems like defensiveness comes from this sense of I want to feel that I'm right, and I'm frustrated because you don't apparently understand me, and you're attacking me, and so I have to defend myself because my personal paradigm of myself says I'm not a person who needs to be attacked. I'm not a person who needs to be confronted. I'm not a person who needs to be misunderstood. And the way you're coming at me or attacking me or approaching me I feel threatened because you're destroying my identity of myself. The way you're characterizing me is destroying the identity of myself. I'm feeling injured because all this information coming at me is shocking because I can't believe that this would all go so badly for me.
That's a very good description.
Is there other ways that you two would describe like defensiveness? Like what would be characteristics of defensiveness you think come out?
So I think one key part of it is the fear. So people get emotionally escalated because they feel that fight or flight. So it's kind of a response to feeling like you need to protect yourself.
Yeah, you're challenged, and that fear, I agree with. There's definitely a fear of, what does this conflict mean to our relationship? What does this conflict mean to our situation? What does this conflict mean to my job? What does this conflict again mean to my identity or to where I kind of fit in my self place? Yeah,
But the point of it is that response is not constructive. And if you want to get to a better place, you have to choose another route.
Yeah, but initially you're correct that it's identifying a vulnerability you have in yourself, right? Like you wouldn't be defensive if
it's pain, right?
Yeah.
Like, well, a lot of times defensiveness isn't necessarily about the problem. It's about the trauma that's happened before the situation. So a lot of time defensiveness is more about the trauma that someone's dealt with in the past, and this has triggered something to create an environment for them where they don't feel safe. So when I think of defensiveness, it's not necessarily a lot of times about the situation. It's about what it's triggered inside of them that has to be resolved in order for a really constructive conversation to be able to happen moving forward.
I think it's also a learned behavior. So if you learned that behavior from your parents, it's just a habit. Some people automatically go into defensiveness and then you're there.
Yeah, I like that. And come back to Lisa's, I think there's a little bit of both in what you just said, America. The idea that if your parents responded to each other this way, it could be part of your script, but it is also a trigger of when somebody is yelling at me, the response should be because of the things I have imprinted upon myself because of past conditioning to respond in this way, or because this is what you do. You don't concede, you don't acknowledge, you don't address, you fight it because it's a challenge that is it's harmful. You have to defend yourself from this challenge, or this is how my mom coped, or this is how my dad coped, or I will cope like my parents, or by like whoever my this person wasn't in your historical script.
Well, it's not natural when someone comes up and blames you for something in a really aggressive way to say, let me find out more about what is going on with you.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, let me be soft and gentle in response to whatever this angry stuff is.
So I worked in the healthcare system for 17 years. And I got that a lot because I worked in a lot of high level accounting issues to where these accounts were getting ready to be going to court. So I had to go and I had to talk to these patients. And a lot of the times the issues with the anger wasn't about the issue at all. It was about the frustrations of things that were going on, you know, with what the situation was. And so I really had to learn how to fine tune when I talk to people and remember that more than likely the reason they're coming at me isn't really even about me. Or if there is a conflict, I have to find out really what the root of the problem is and maybe ask a few questions in order to really be effective. But if I become defensive as well, then there's not going to be a resolution. It's just going to be a fight as to who is right and not how do we solve the problem within the conflict.
So it kind of has to do with the orientation too. Are we being really adversarial where I'm right or you're right? Or are we on the same team, both working on figuring out this accounting?
Well, and that's the thing is sometimes I could say something, not me, and they just jump on me. And the thing is I think that happens in a lawyer's office, that happens with mediation, things like that, but it's all triggered from something inside us that's telling us that we feel a certain way. And we have to protect that feeling of creating a safe place for us. And so sometimes the conflict, what we think the conflict is, it's really not the conflict. And so when a conversation begins and starts to move forward, a lot of the times you find out that it's not necessarily about that. It's about not feeling heard. It's about feeling that you are trying to be superior to the other person. It's about not feeling like you're working together, but having to be bossed around or, you know, depending on whatever the situation is. And so a lot of the times, if people in that situation, at least this is what I had to do, and this is what I have to do a lot of times, I have to remember, okay, the issue's probably not me. The issue is a different issue. I just have to ask the right question or take a second to breathe for a minute and then find out what the real issue is. And the only way I can do that is by saying, hey, this is what I heard you say. Am I hearing you right that X, Y, and Z is happening and it's making you feel this way? And because of that, you feel that I'm doing this to hurt you intentionally. And then once you can kind of figure out and navigate those things, then it comes to a point where you can actually start the conflict resolution of saying, okay, so these are just feelings. I can promise you this was not my intent. This is not what the intention was. So how do we resolve this so that we can move forward, so that we can either finish the project, finish, the discussion, and move forward in a healthy way? And find the resolution that we need.
Sometimes people think if they have a feeling that there's a reason that caused it, or there's a person that caused it. And so they say, if I'm angry, I need to find somebody that's the source that caused this anger. Sorry to interrupt you, Travis.
No, I think you're right that oftentimes it's hard to separate what I'm experiencing and take responsibility for what I'm experiencing and attribute it to someone else as the trigger of what I'm experiencing. Like so and so makes me be mad. Well, no, there's something about me that I'm not able to regulate when I engage with so and so. But it's not that person who is specifically the problem. It's your reference to that person or your orientation to that person that is. And I was going to add, one of the things that also becomes problematic about the referencing and orientation of defensiveness is a relationship that is a long old relationship that just has so many built-in systems or scripts so that you're anticipating as soon as somebody's speaking, you hear a tone, like you become super finely in tune to this person. So as soon as that tone shows up, you're like, oh great, here we go, because I'm gonna be mad right now. Or
I have that with certain people in my life that as soon as I hear a tone, I'm like, come on, come at me. I am ready to fight, and I will come at you hard if you come at me. And they're like, whoa, whoa, whoa. And it's like, no, I told you that tone is one thing that like will trigger me every time.
Yeah. But it's still not really their problem, right?
No, it's my trauma. It's my trauma related to past situations of feeling insecure in certain areas. And so, and once you realize that, you can actually start working through the process of fixing some of those things. But I have that with certain people, and I know I do, and they know it. And so when it starts coming up, they know I've given them permission and just say, look, this is not the intent. Like, yeah, this is not the intent. Right, like, now. Let's calm down for just a second. And he'll be like, oh yeah, sorry, Kate, triggered. I was just triggered. And I've got to step back and recognize that was me. That was not you. That was me. That was just my perception of putting on my boxing gloves and needing to go.
Well, I think that, like you're identifying, Lisa, some of it is when you recognize historical relationships that just have almost fatigue in them. There's that question of at what point should some relationships probably just end, but maybe they can't end because there's other things connected to them. Maybe if it's a long marriage, it's the kids. If it's a business relationship, it might be just the business. There may be extenuating factors that make ending the relationship super complicated, but that doesn't change the fact that like you both potentially stayed way too long because like you're really not overcoming the triggers. You're not overcoming the scripts.
You don't ever repair and reconnect.
Well, it definitely takes two people, and you can do the work on yourself, but if what the other person's not willing to come to the table and recognize and be a part of that conversation. And the hard thing is a lot of us weren't taught that as children. And so now we're going out into a working environment and we're having to learn it through trial and error in a working environment. And that makes it really difficult, especially when you start going off into your own business. But with everything in life, there's an ebb and a flow, and then you just have to take those hard knocks and learn and hopefully grow for the future.
Yeah, well, so I guess this, and you've already been referencing some of these as we've been talking, the idea of how do you get awareness, like self-awareness is part of the process, which that will help us transition into the retreat or the surrender. Is it only takes two people if two people want it to work out, right? If only one person wants it to work out and the other person doesn't, then the person with awareness gets to decide how long the relationship continues, right? Or you get to decide the new rules or the new boundaries or whatever it might be, because you do get to set your own boundaries about how you engage in conflict and dispute resolution. I'll acknowledge that, like during the Trump period, I'll just say I'm not a Trumper, but I got Trump fatigue. Like there was just so much caustic discussion and dialogue around all of that stuff that I eventually I realized this time I'm not participating in politics. Like I'm not gonna get into the he's not my president or any of that stuff. Like it's just I'm just not gonna actually look at the news because I realize I have so many other things happening in my life at the moment that are way more important than who's president. You know, like I'll have to deal with whoever president is, but to actually add into my life whatever my identity might be regarding hate speech regarding the president or the the incompetency of the other president or the like you get to decide like in terms of like what are your limited resources, how am I going to engage in this conflict? Well, maybe I just don't, right? And so when people will start to ask me questions now about Trump or Biden or you know Robert Kennedy Jr., I'll just say I don't know. I'm like I have no idea. Like, what's your opinion, right? So there's actually zero reference for me to them. Like, I can't actually participate in the conversation because I have no data, and it allows me to have zero identity conflict that would become my defensive. And I just say, well, tell me what you're thinking, and then you can do the reflective listening. So it sounds like he's the right guy for you, and but I recognize that creating having no data and being willing to admit I have no data like is actually okay, right? Is it okay to say I just don't know? Like because sometimes we participate in conversations because we like to feel like we're informed, or we like to feel like we can participate, or we can like to feel like we're educated. But sometimes if you can just say I don't know, like educate me about why you feel important, why you feel this is an important topic. Sometimes that's an interesting place to go because you can just recognize from the beginning I don't have to participate in this. I don't have anything to lose.
I think that's why religion, politics, everything, it's one of those things that it's hard to discuss because sometimes I think you forget that it's not about making the other person believe what you believe. It's learning how to respect others in their beliefs and listen and allow them to have their beliefs, but know that you have the right to have your own belief system. And I think some of that's fallen away as if you don't believe the same as me, we can't be friends. We can't do that. And that's a lot with the conflicts that are going along in this generation or things that are going on right now. But I have people that are close to me and it's like, look, I will talk religion with you. And even though you don't believe what I believe, that's fine. But if you can't respect the fact that this is what I believe in, and you keep on trying to change my opinion of it, then I can't have the conversation because it's no longer safe. So learning what those boundaries are for you so that when you do have conflict, you can say, look, I have to step back because this is not a conversation that I feel I'm being heard in. And so either I engage and I break this relationship that I care about, or I take a step back and I let you know what my boundaries are. And if you respect that, we can move forward as if there's not a problem between the two of us.
Sure. And that openness helps set the rules, right? So you're not being caustic, you're not being manipulative or demeaning. You're just saying, like I've reached a spot in this conversation where we've kind of reached this before where you want me to think your side's valid, but you don't seem to think my side's valid. But if we're going to have this dialogue, it needs to be valid for both of us in order for this to be a safe conversation. Yeah, like that's totally appropriate.
I think the word that's helpful in those situations is curiosity. Is this person actually curious about how I think and my perspective on this? Or is this just trying to educate me to the way things should be or are from their perspective?
Yeah. I saw a meme the other day that said, I stopped worrying about right when I realized I don't care what you're thinking. and I realized that's a pretty harsh way to to see it. But if we're more honest about why we're having a conversation, even with ourselves, it helps us realize why we're having this conversation, right? If I'm having a conversation with somebody just so I can help them become a better person, I should probably not have the conversation. like their eternal progress or their political salvation or their whatever. Sometimes it's in that category. If we talk about loving what is again, the idea of like, what's my business? Like, am I in my lane? Am I in somebody else's lane? Like, maybe I should back off because it it shouldn't be important to me. Like this is not relevant. Where if I keep it more with Lisa's saying, are we having a constructive dialogue where we're sharing? Then sure, maybe it's appropriate. But if we're trying to convert or save or uh, belittle or manipulate someone into coming into alignment, that we probably should not have the conversation.
It's unsolicited advice.
Well, even if it's solicited, it's still the idea of, are you in your lane? Like, are you like, is it your business what this person does or doesn't do?
And that's the thing that we all have to learn is our actions are our actions, and we have no control over anyone else around us. So if we are staying in our lane, and if we are doing what we're supposed to, and if someone comes and says something to us that we don't agree with, it's like, well, that's their thing. That has no impact on me. And if it does, then that boundary needs to be set. But if it doesn't, then I can love that person, let them have their thing, and let it be theirs.
Yeah, and I think even in regards to like poor decisions. So like sometimes as parents, you might have a child who's over 18 and they're like, I'm gonna go be self-destructive in whatever way that is. Even as a parent, you can say, so I hear you in informing me that you're going to you understand where I'm at. It's not going to change my love for you. I also want to identify that I don't have to participate in it. So like if you in fact destroy your life, which is totally fine, I hope you understand I'm not going to bail you out. Like I'm okay with you riding your river and doing your thing, like it's no big deal. But I don't have to, if you're telling me this out of anger because it's going to be my fault, I'm just letting you know I'm not going to accept that responsibility. I'm not going to be part of your self-destruction. And that could be even with adults, right? Like we have people who, even as an attorney, as I've talked to clients, and they've clearly heard me say, I don't think that is in your best interest. And they'll say, well, I still want to go to court. I'll say, well, you have every right to go to court. I don't want it. So I'm not going to go to court with you because I don't want to help you bring about that outcome. And maybe it won't happen. Maybe you'll be right. Maybe 100% of what you're saying will happen. I don't want to spend my resources on that adventure because even if you're paying me, it's not worth it to me. But I think we have that option to it. Like I don't have to go the whole distance with somebody in a conversation, in a conflict, whatever. Right? At some point, you can say that this is just as far as my resources are budgeted.
I love Debbie's statement about that. She says you don't have to attend every party you're invited to.
Yeah, that's good.
I had a conflict with someone I really truly loved, and it got to a point where there was just all these little jabs at me, and it was at this place where I was like, okay, I jabbed back once, and it didn't make me feel good. I was like, this is not the person I am trying to be. And then they came back and tried to jab at me again. And I sent them a personal text because it was in a group chat. And I just said, you know what? I love you. And this isn't helping me show up the best way I can show up. So I'm going to step away from this group chat and I'm going to step away from talking to you for a week. And then after that week, I need to reevaluate if I'm ready to like continue on having conversations, because I don't want to belittle you. I don't want, when those comments come, I don't want to feel like I have to attack. And I said, because that's not who I'm trying to be. And because I care about you, that's not what I'm going to do. So maybe in a week we can talk again and things will be fine. And, we can just put it under the bridge and move forward, as long as our conversation in the future is not one where we're belittling or trying to make fun of or make look bad in front of other people. I'm willing to show up. But if not, that's fine. I'll just continue to add time on to that boundary until you're willing to keep it, or you're just not in my life. And that gets to be your choice. And they almost didn't know what to do. But it was because it wasn't like I was saying, I don't love you. I'm not going to show up for you, because I will show up for you. But if you treat me this way, and if I feel like I'm being treated this way and you don't want to have a conversation about it, then I need to back away and make sure my mental health is in a good place, so that when we do come back, that I can come at you lovingly and not with anger.
That's very good. I love that. So let's transition into surrendering. Why? I mean, I think we've kind of been on the verge of it. Like as we walk away from defensiveness, there is some surrendering. As we like avoid being defensive, there is some potential surrendering. But maybe why do we more specifically have a hard time with the idea that we cannot surrender? Like, we will go down with this one. Like, this is so important to me. I will survive this argument because, like, that person knows this is like this. No, they will acknowledge I am right, and they are not getting away with it.
So I think you mentioned something even in that question. What's the difference between avoiding it and surrendering?
So
avoiding the conversation altogether, avoiding the person, avoiding the interaction.
Yeah, which I think that brings up a different point. Like, because I was talking with someone about, they're like, you know, that person's just not nice. Like, why do you go over there? And the person was family, and I said, so we should just forever not see them. Like, I mean, just be like, there's been a problem, but like it's just over, you know, like, and it's because they didn't want to have a conversation about the initial problem. They're like, no, the relationship's ended. And you're like, wait, this is family. Like, we're gonna just end the relationship. Because that's like hyper avoidance, right? Like, that's like vigilant avoidance, because like the person won't be coming into alignment. So how do we have, I guess, enough grace just to say, like, maybe like family relationships should be important, like regardless of conflict, or like how do we balance the different boundaries with the fact that maybe something shouldn't be destroyed?
Well, I think you have to define those boundaries like Lisa was talking about. You have to figure out what's going to feel safe, and maybe that's limiting in-person interactions and still loving them. And maybe maybe you can send gifts and not have a conversation. There may be situations that are that difficult that even with that desire to connect, you have to be really careful and intentional about it.
I guess I struggle with the word surrender, because if there's conflicts and you're surrendering, is it really surrender, or is it humbling yourself to recognizing like what your portion is in it, and then like having that conversation to move through it?
Yeah, I agree with that. Because the idea of capitulation, you know, like where you give up everything that's important to you, I don't think you should do that. Like, if you just concede and you're just saying, you're right, I'm everything you say, just whatever, you know, that usually leads to apathy, repression of feelings, depression. Like, the relationship's not good, because you're not whole yourself. You're not able to approach wholeness or wellness.
Authenticity.
Yeah, you're not being authentic. So I definitely don't think people should back away from conflict in a way that leaves them less. You know, like, if you recognize that I'm not a healthy person because of the way that conflict ended, that was not a good way to end. But there is again, like, that idea of realizing I'm trying to prove myself right with somebody who won't see me. I'm okay recognizing that I'm okay. Like, I'm okay recognizing I'm right. You know, like, I can tell some people, like, you know, I appreciate that you see it that way. I don't. So like, what are we going to do next?
You're going to accept the reality that they see things differently.
Yeah.
And it depends if you're talking like in a business aspect, sometimes that just means our values are not the same. And to work with you, it would be detrimental to both of us because neither of us will get what we need out of the relationship to feel like it's what we really wanted. And so it's coming back to boundaries.
Well, I think the question is, what do you know about yourself in the conflict? I mean, that's one of the, some of it is, what do I know about myself in relationship to this other person? What do I know about myself in relationship to this thing that I'm supposed to be performing? You know, like I used to actively litigate and I don't anymore because I recognize that the process of litigating is kind of overwhelming for my personal circumstances. And so being able to tell people I don't litigate initially hurt my feelings. Like it wasn't their problem. It was just like I had to realize I probably shouldn't be doing that. Right. But it wasn't a problem for me initially to realize, you know, I had to realize what I was walking away from because of who I was. And it wasn't about the people asking me to litigate, or even if they're like, well, look, you know, you could do this, it'll be easy. Like you try that a couple of times and you're like, it's not easy ever. And so you like, I don't even have to explain my whole self to them. I can just say, I just don't litigate. And I'm okay with that. Like I feel okay not litigating. And I don't need to really process that with you.
Making a clear rule can be really useful. You just say, no.
Yeah, sorry, America. So is the surrender that you're talking about in this case is accepting that that's not what's best for you and acknowledging that you do not have to share the whys to those people in order to be able to move forward after that conversation.
Correct. Yeah. Like I'm leaving a place that I used to be able to be. And so that's a surrender. Like that's a conceding, but I'm not leaving less of a person because I'm aware of that. I'm accepting a new me. I'm accepting a new place. I'm accepting a, you know, it's like when you get old and you realize, you know, you're not gonna be able to play high school football anymore. Like it's like you, at some point you should just confront that there's just some things that just are, and it's okay.
Times of life.
Yeah, and that could be in relationships, you know. But again, I think most of the ability to walk away in a healthy way is the way you talk about it, you know, and I've noticed that sometimes even I think even brevity is helpful, like where you could just say to people, like again, that example of, you know, I think we've been here before. Are we going to do this again? You know, I realize it's important to you, but I don't want to do it again. Or you know,
this is night number 23.
Yeah, like maybe without us embracing this in a hostile manner, I'm going to let you know I'm not going to participate because I've been here before. But it appears you want to talk about it again. Is there a way you can talk about it without me participating and still being okay? You know, like,
maybe the surrender is disengaging from the adversarial process where somebody has to be the winner. Maybe we're just trying to understand each other and we don't have to be like, this was on you, you know, like you screwed up.
well, yeah, and even on that point, like sometimes even in our own selves, like I'll have to say, this person will never accept his or her side of this. I need to stop asking them to. Because there must be something going on for them that is preventing them from having insight about what they're doing. And so sometimes that will help me change the questions I'm asking because I realize I'm not trying to validate myself anymore. I'm just trying to understand. Maybe
instead of asking them to accept reality repeatedly and they're like, no, I don't care, I don't want to. And then you're like, but could you maybe please accept that? And you have to allow them to not.
Yeah, well, exactly. Because if they say, I just want to accept that, you'll say, okay, I appreciate that. This is something that whatever doesn't fit in your paradigm. So, but then I can say, could you help me understand, maybe I'm trying to understand why I seem to think that could be important. So I'm appreciate you're not going to own it, but let's just play around with it and talk to me about um why you think why I think it might be valuable. Like maybe could you help see me and explain to me why I think it might be valuable, right? Like so you in essence you're asking them to see you by saying for me it
Empathy.
seems like that's important because I keep referencing these things that they seem important to me. Could you help me identify my own perspective? Like why would I see this as important?
Oh, that's a really good idea. Have them try and look at that. And I also think it's important that you recognize that when someone's repeating, that means they haven't been heard. So if they keep coming back to it and you're like, haven't we had this discussion before? There's something still that needs, it's a sliver that's in your finger and it's still red and hurting, whatever. You haven't gotten it out. There's something still in there.
Yeah, I tried to experiment recently with somebody. I said, let's pretend that you're my best friend. Help me understand as my best friend how I would solve your problem. Like so, like we create a third party role play where I don't want them to talk to me as me because I seem to be still creating some kind of interference. I said, let's just say that I'm somebody else. If I'm somebody else, help me understand how I could help solve your problem. But they also have to understand what I've told them, right? Like my data is still relevant to them. But now tell me as your friend, seeing me, how I would help, how I could solve your problem. Because apparently I'm not coming up with it. Like I'm not able to see the problem.
This definitely seems pretty advanced. You have to be able to figure out all the people and what their roles are.
Well, I think some of it is the awareness, right? When we have awareness of ourselves, then we are able to step away from the expectation that we're something else, right? Like if I'm so sometimes I think surrendering is being able to step aside from the situation to outline, I don't get what's happening. Like I don't get I'm experiencing. So is there another way that we can talk about this? Because I apparently am not understanding you. And I'd like to because I can tell that me not understanding you is perpetuating the conflict for you. But I'll also say like I'm feeling nothing. Like I have no idea what I'm supposed to be feeling because I don't get what's happening, but I can see you're definitely upset.
Do you think this has anything to do with orientations, like people who are more in a thinking frame versus an emotional framework? Just the way that
Absolutely.
we respond to somebody who's responding in a really logical, analytical way can really trigger somebody who's like, you are not catching my feeling part of it. And the logical person is like, well, I'm tracking this logically because that's how I look at problems.
Absolutely. No, I'm a logical processor and as I've studied personalities or referenced them, it's interesting because I will learn how people logically express feelings. Well, I reference if somebody's crying in my processing system, I compute crying appears to be a logical response to what this person has given me by way of data. Like if they're super mad, sometimes I'll be like, their anger right now, I am not processing as rationally connected to something at the moment. So I don't understand. The data is not adding up for this emotional experience. It's super sick, I think, sometimes because it's like it's so you know, I don't think it's necessarily sociopathic or whatever, but it's the idea that like I'm just not getting it. But I logically understand the data.
See, and I'm the opposite. I am an emotional, my emotions tell me when there's something wrong. And then I have to dive into finding out what the emotion is, if there's truth to that emotion, if it's just like my own story, or if it's an actual story of what's going on. And then I have to decide what path I'm going to die on, right? Like, what cross am I going to bear? Am I going to actually go with humble myself enough to like say, okay, in this particular situation, it's just an emotion. It's tied to something that's not necessarily with that. Or in this situation, this emotion is bringing it up because I have the analytical part of it to prove that I am doing this. So I can say, I have proof that my emotions are tying to this, and that it's relevant because of X, Y, and Z. And so for me, because I am an emotional person, I have to really, before I have hard conversations, sometimes I have to step back and just tell people, and just like, I'm not ready. I've heard what you've said. Let me write it down. Like, is this what I heard you say correctly? And then just say, okay, I've got to go and sit and think about this for a minute. And then I have to go and say, okay, all of these emotions are coming up. I have to write them down. And then I have to say, okay, is this emotion actually valid, or is it just emotion? Is it just like anger, trauma, whatever it is? And then I have to say, okay, where's my proof? Where is my proof that these feelings are just not feelings, that they're actually valid and they have substance or value behind it to back it as to, because my feelings are valid, but I have to substantiate whether or not it's just a trigger or like a trauma, or if it's actually something that I can say, okay, there is something there that I can say for the analytical side, this is my proof.
So when you're in conflict with an analytical person, you have to assemble enough kind of emotional references that equal data points so that your emotions can be validated.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't know if that's wrong or right, but I've learned for me, because I have had to work with like vice presidents and chief financial officers and different type of people, that sometimes my emotions are just my emotions, and they're not relating to the actual situation. It's like, oh, this is actually overwhelm. Okay. This isn't necessarily to do with this. Oh, it's more related to like all of the things. And so I really have to tie it back and say, okay, these are the things they've told me. And because I'm an emotional person and I can feel there's something off, what is actually off? And then I have to go down the line and say, okay, this emotion of anxiety comes when I'm feeling either angry or sad. Okay, feels more like it's sadness. Okay, that sadness is tied to this feeling of, not being worthy of this or something like that, or me not actually being able to perform it at that way. And so then I can come back to the situation and say, okay, in reference to this question, you stated this. These are my feelings, and this is my proof I have to show that this is how I've been performing. It is not performance based on like how you feel I should do, but here is my performance base of what I am doing, and I am comfortable with what I'm doing. So if this is, part of this, detail of what I need to do, I don't know that I can do it for you. And so it's really coming back and being self-aware. And I have let my emotions run my life for so long, learning that there has to be, even though I'm not an analytical person in some ways, I am when it comes to business with like processes, but not how I run myself. So learning how to do that, it's ebb and flow. It's learning, but the more I learn and the more I coach other people, or the more that I get coached, the more I start learning about the emotions that I have and where they're tied to. And then I can say, okay, is this really true? Or is this just my emotion?
What movie is that has all the colored emotion people in the control center in the brain?
Yeah, what is that? I can't remember.
I don't know.
It's by
But there's
Pixar.
like sadness and anger and
I know. Because look at how much you're reflecting, and it's so useful because you're figuring out where you are in all of those things, and the reflection is really looking at what happened during that conversation, what could I have done differently? How are my emotions affecting this conversation? That's really mature, advanced conflict.
You really have to humble yourself a lot to do it. And it's not like a easy process.
Sometimes you have to do it after things have gone badly. Sometimes in the moment, they don't work well.
Here to know everything right at one time, and we're meant to mess up. And the hard thing is people are our experiences at times in learning how to deal with things better.
That's one thing I really like about mediating with other people, is watching people use good conflict resolution skills, because we don't get a lot of education sometimes growing up or in formal settings about how to resolve interpersonal problems that involve a lot of emotions.
I like that movie, I guess, that's come out again. They've added anxiety as one of the emotions.
Anxiety was in the first one, the fear guy.
No, it's different than fear. Like,
they actually added another emotion to the group.
Yeah, they added, I think they added like anxiety specifically, not instead of like just fear. Like, and
I haven't seen the new one.
I haven't seen it either, but I just saw like a commercial, and it referenced this new person, and you're like, oh yeah, like I'm like, that was good, because the person is like perpetually disheveled, like like their hair is like always up in the, it's like always look slightly electrocuted,
like the Charlie Brown kid.
Yeah,
it's in the smoke. I think it's interesting that none of the three of us can think of the name of that.
I know, I'm trying to think.
Everybody knows what we're talking about, though. It's easily referenced.
I'll look it up.
Yeah. I guess if I was gonna like summarize the surrender thing for me.
Inside out.
Inside out. Yeah. I think what I have to do is, as soon as with my therapist, he said a long time ago, is there a reason why you can't be yourself right now? And that was a really haunting and disturbing question, because I didn't get initially what he was talking about. But if you start to, and Lisa's kind of processed it a bit there with her analysis of herself, but the idea of, why am I not naturally, authentically civil, kind, etc. at this moment? Like, what is happening with me in regards to this person or this scenario or this system of scenarios that is causing me to be out of alignment with myself? And how do I get back to myself as soon as possible? And so,
I like that you're assuming that yourself is very kind and all those positive things.
Well, I'm anticipating that my best self would be those things.
Yeah. I'm not saying you're not.
Yeah, no.
That's a good assumption.
But the idea is if I'm not my best self at the moment, what is happening in me or with me or in reference to me that I need to work on to bring me back into alignment? Because if you think about it in a spiritual way, when I am my best self, I feel the spirit, I'm connected with God, I'm connected with my surroundings, I'm in tune with other people. Even if I'm logically processing them, I'm at least sensitive to what's happening with them better than if I'm not. Like, if I'm living in anxiety or stress or tension or frustration or anger, I'm really turned off a lot of resources that come to me naturally when I'm in a healthy state. So oftentimes surrendering to me is a little bit more like Lisa's identifying as being that humble enough that I can just sit with myself and understand that I'm referencing this conflict from somewhere else because I'm really pissed off right now. And if I need to get back to a sense of balance, what steps do I need to take? Like, do I need to go on a walk? Do I need to eat some food? Do I need to drink water? Do I need to go? Do I just need to lay down and take a nap, or like try to take a nap, or turn on some ocean waves? Because I've found that getting back in alignment, or being or ending that deregulation, is tremendously important to me personally. And I guess I put that alignment as a higher priority than a conflict. And so for me at this point, like I work I think fairly diligently to say, if I'm going to be out of alignment, or if I'm recognizing I'm out of alignment, what boundary needs to be openly and civilly communicated, so that I'm not perpetuating this state, which I know is not good for me.
Mhm.
And if I'm a healthier person, generally the people around me are less bugged. Because I recognize that when you start to live in a dysfunctional system, people reference off the dysfunctional person in the system, right? And it's not always the same person, right? Like if mom's having a bad day, then like the kids are all kind of like paying attention. If dad's having a bad day, then mom's paying attention. If the neighbor next door is having a bad day, maybe the people in the neighborhood are having, they're all paying attention, because they're like, this is disturbing my system. This is disturbing my ecosystem, my equilibrium. So how do we get this person back in alignment, where that person, that dysfunctional person, shouldn't be my priority?
Mhm.
I should be able to say, what is causing me to be out of alignment, without anybody else having to do anything, right? They like, nobody else should be responsible for me being in alignment.
Manipulating and controlling a situation in order to stop the.
Yeah. So for me, surrendering ultimately says, if I'm in a conflict, what role am I playing, and why am I caught in this situation? Like, how do I allow myself to get caught in this situation?
So one book that's helpful with that whole scenario is that Conflict Without, what is it? Conflict Without, I don't remember the rest of it. Basically you can find yourself in one of the like the drama triangle, where you think, I only have three choices. I can be a victim, or a perpetrator, or a rescuer. And you have to say, I'm not playing any of those roles. I won't play that drama game. I'm out. So that's a way you surrender, is you just disengage from the entire scenario.
Yeah. Like, but it's that you actually surrender in awareness, so that you don't lose anything.
Yeah. You might want to play that game, but I won't.
Yeah. And I think Yoda has the phrase that says, be willing to lose every what does he say? Something like, the gist is, don't be attached to anything you fear to lose.
Oh yeah.
But which is hard, because you're like, well, I don't want to lose my family, I don't want to lose this, or I don't want to. But when you start to see things accurately, you are less worried about losing those things, because they are in perspective.
That's your Taoism, right? Taoism.
Yeah. I love Taoism.
It's Conflict Without Casualties is that book I was referencing.
Yeah. That is a good book. I read that. At least I've had that book. I don't know if I think I read it in like 06 or something, in connection with my that programs. I like the idea that when you remove all the potential anxieties around a conflict, and you just say, we need to have a conversation. I want you to know that it's not a big deal, because it's not about you or I or whatever, but this just seems to be something we keep experiencing.
Mm-hmm.
How could we talk about this in a way that we could maybe effectively address it? Because it doesn't appear that we've been able to solve this problem. I think it's totally appropriate to have constructive conversations around things that might cause conflict. I think conflict.
Well, it depends if people are ready for that, because there are some people who can't do that. And so there's this thing, and it's kind of you know, some people believe in it, some people don't, but there's a thing that you can, a lot of people are getting into, and it's writing a letter to the higher person's power. Like writing a letter to someone when you know that the conversation is not going to be accepted, and you write out all your feelings, all of your emotion, good, bad, positive, negative, and you just say, look, this is how I feel. This is why I feel this way. I am opening myself up to having a conversation with you. But I know you're not willing to have that because you can't always have someone there who's willing to do it. And so you write it, and then what people do is they burn it and they put it out into the universe, and they always end it with forgiveness. They always end up with, I love you, I forgive you, I hope you, you know, feel this, and you'll reach out so we can move forward. And it opens up for you to forgive and to release all those feelings, but also know that you have no control over the other person at times. And maybe that's not going to come, and maybe they won't come to you, but eventually maybe that opportunity will come. But you will be in a place of peace because you have taken the time to let those things go. So then you don't hold those burdens, and they're not yours anymore to carry.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what you're saying, but sometimes like you actually have to have a conversation, right?
That's true. It depends on the situation. But
Yeah.
if they're not willing to have a conversation, then you know, that's always been a way for me to like release that I've learned.
Yeah, well, no, I think it
love.
might be, you know, like if you can, if part of it is your sense of I need a resolution to this thing, a letter like you're describing may be a good like hypothetical exercise to help just go through the process of, and then you burn it so that at least it's like resolved inside of you. Like I like that process. Uh, but like I'm thinking like if you have an employee who just it's not going to work out, like this person just doesn't fit.
Oh yeah, no, you have to
You
have that conversation.
yeah, or maybe you get to a point in your marriage where you're just like it's not going to work, or you get like if you have kids or you have a neighbor or you I mean just if there's something that just actually like there's it's unavoidable has to be addressed. I think you can similar to what you're processing there though, Lisa, like I can say, look, here's my problem in this conflict. I appreciate that that's not as important as the outcome of what we need to accomplish or what we need to achieve. So sometimes even coming to the conflict, owning some of your side, you know, to say, I realize I play a role in this. I feel you play a role, but I also realize that you're not able to confront that at the moment. But we have to make a decision, and it's not a big deal. Like we're just here's my perspective of the decisions we have to make. You know, one, we need to find you another place because you can be a part of their solution, right? I realize you haven't left because you need this problem solved in a different way that we haven't maybe explored, but the status quo we isn't going to work. So how do we end the status quo? And let's focus on that without maybe attributing fault or blame or whatever. We'll embrace this is where we're at right now. Anyway, I think it's been another hour, so it's awesome. I love these conversations. I think they're super therapeutic and exploratory and awesome. We do have another one tomorrow, which is fill your lamps. I have no idea what the topic is yet for that, but we will jump on that and have a good time tomorrow. It's the same time. The link is on our website, stewardgrowth.com. You can also go to YouTube channel at Steward Growth hyphen and Lisa gave it to us hyphen MP 2023.
NP 2023.
And you can visit some of the previous discussions. We always look forward to these, and again, these are not as America will often say, they're not presentations. They're meant to be kind of group discussions, so anybody's welcome to join, and we look forward to the dialogue. All right, we'll see you.